Prost's left is Gilles Villeneuve in the Ferrari, and any moment now the warm-up lap.
Yes, there they go, moving away on the warm-up lap. We'll probably see the usual weaving a bit around to warm up the tyres and things. They come down this fairly short pit straight into quite a tight right-hand corner. What have we got? Just looking at the field. There we go. Reasonably open. Back another short straight. It's a twisty circuit, and it's very hard work, the circuit. It's bumpy, there's no real peace. Around the long, sweeping 180-degree right-hander, a left-hander rather. Down a short straight, and that's followed by a very tricky little flick to the left and a flick to the right. A couple of good corners, quite difficult. That first left-hand flick is very quick indeed, taken almost flat out. Now around the slow second gear corner they're in and onto the main straight. Of course, that's very important to get out of this corner well, with good traction, the one that we're looking at now as they're coming out, to get a good run down the straight. And of course, there the power advantage of the turbos will really tell. It's going to be very difficult, as usual, for the normally aspirated cars to deal with the turbos, because there isn't much opportunity to pass on this track, except at the end of this straight. There goes Prost leading the field. That's a very quick corner, taking in about fourth gear, probably something like 130 miles an hour, wide open, quite difficult because there's nothing to look at. It's quite a featureless circuit from a driver's point of view. It's all quite flat. There's the sea in the background. Back into the twisty section again now. A tight left-hander here, second gear corner again. Little short straight. Back on the brakes. All busy stuff all the time. Another left-hander. Again, rather an awkward one with quite a wide entry and quite a tight exit. You've got to get in very accurately into this corner. And then down to the final hairpin, and they come back under orders. For the starter, Prost will slow down, try and let the field bunch up so that he's not sitting on the line too long, because of course the red light doesn't go on until the starter's satisfied that everybody, the back men, are in position. And of course, the guys at front have got to sit there with their engines running, no air going through their radiators to cool them. In the hot weather, that's always a problem. Water temperature rises quite fast on these racing cars when they're sitting still. And of course, they're also liable to keep the car in gear, and the clutch can start to heat up too because it's dragging a little bit. And that's always a problem if you get a overheated clutch on the line. Looking a little bit ragged coming in. They're just about all round.
63 laps then, 197 miles. Remember the heat, over 30 degrees. Remember this bumpy circuit. On the left of your picture is Prost. On the right of your picture in the front row, Gilles Villeneuve. And we are expecting the Ferraris to have tyre trouble because they had a lot in practice. Watch those lights. Derek Ongaro, the Englishman, starting the Brazilian Grand Prix. Watch for green and go. The Brazilian Grand Prix is on. Coming through very well is Keke Rosberg, but it's Villeneuve into the lead with René Arnoux up into second place. Down into fourth position goes Alain Prost, and it is Villeneuve, this tremendously gutsy French-Canadian driver who is leading away in the turbocharged Ferrari. This car weighs 595 kilograms in comparison with the lower weight limit, and it's Keke Rosberg in second place. Rosberg, the Finnish driver, in the very lightweight Williams, and he's going right up alongside Villeneuve on lap one. It's a challenge now between the Ferrari and then the two Renaults of Prost and Arnoux.
Well, it's a great opening series of corners by Keke Rosberg, but unfortunately I think he made a tactical error because he's in trying to go around the outside going onto the straight, and the turbos have swallowed him up on the straight. He didn't get out of that corner quickly because he was trying to deal with Villeneuve, which was over-ambitious, but he drove. It was fantastic effort getting where he did into the first corner and then passing the Renault into the second corner, but he's battling away. But he really has got a problem now that the turbos can get their feet down on the straights.
So it's turbos first, second and third. Ferrari leads with Villeneuve in second position. It looks like René Arnoux. Very difficult to identify the two Renaults with their drivers in white helmets. Yes, it's Arnoux second. Prost is in third position. Keke Rosberg in the first normally aspirated engine car. They complete lap one, and look at the tyre marks from wheel spin. And there is Nelson Piquet coming up through the field. Arnoux second, Prost third. Then it's Nelson Piquet and Patrese in fifth and seventh positions. And Didier Pironi is well up in the second of the two Ferraris on lap two. Now, how long are the Michelin tyres, or the Goodyear tyres? I'd forgotten for a moment that Ferrari have changed their tyre allegiance this year. So Villeneuve really pressing on. The two Renaults, which have actually got better chassis this year than the Ferrari, notwithstanding the fact that the English engineer Harvey Postlethwaite left the Fittipaldi team last year to go to Ferrari and design a new carbon fibre chassis for them, and that is what Villeneuve, the leader, is in.
Yes, well, I was just watching them come down the straight there, because it's quite interesting to me to have a look, see how the Ferrari, as if the Ferrari has a slight power advantage, because Prost was ideally placed coming onto the straight to attack. Or was it Arnoux? I've got the same problem. Yes, it's René Arnoux in second place. It's very antisocial of these two drivers to wear the same coloured helmet. But so that establishes the problem that Villeneuve is going to be very hard to pass.
Well, just let's get this clear for you watching, that Prost has got red numbers. Alain Prost has got red numbers on his Renault, and Arnoux has got blue numbers. But it's still Villeneuve leading, Arnoux second, Prost is third, Rosberg is fourth, Piquet or Patrese. Piquet is fifth, then Pironi is in sixth position, and Riccardo Patrese is in seventh place. So both the Brabhams on lap 3 out of 63 are still in contention. And round the left-hander there, number 27, Gilles Villeneuve, who finished second in the World Championship a couple in 1979 in the T5 Ferrari. Then he switched to this turbo last year. And look at the way the two Renaults are bunching up. And René Arnoux, the man who is in second place, actually won the Brazilian Grand Prix in 1980, albeit at a different circuit. So Arnoux, Prost is third. Look at Rosberg, and there is Piquet coming out of Rosberg's slipstream and challenging for fourth position. Piquet, the Brazilian, with 80,000 fervent cheering countrymen egging him on from the grandstands, is determined to do well, naturally, with his World Championship at stake. And it's Patrese in fourth position. It's Patrese ahead of, wrong identification for which I apologise, Riccardo Patrese ahead of his teammate Piquet. And Patrese, of course, is driving in his first race in a Ford Cosworth engine-powered Brabham, because although he drove in South Africa, it was in the Brabham Turbo. And we're now completing lap 3. Villeneuve leads, Arnoux second, Prost is third, Patrese is fourth, Rosberg is in fifth position, and Piquet will be in sixth place. And Didier Pironi has spun off. You can't see it, but we've seen it across the circuit, that Didier Pironi has spun off in the second of the two Ferraris and is down to 13th place. Now, I wonder where Niki Lauda is. You can see that the producer here in Brazil is rightly concentrating on this terrific scrap on lap 4 out of 63, with the mountain shimmering in the background on the first 5 or 6 men. And incidentally, what a contrast to last year, 1981, when it was hot here, but very wet and thoroughly miserable. No change. You can see Niki Lauda is in about 10th position. I saw the Marlboro car, the MP4, coming down the straight towards us there. And Lauda will not be worried about that too much, I suspect, because it is said that it's going to be a miracle if all the turbos finish, not only because of the heat, which doesn't suit them all that well, although you wouldn't think so at the moment, but because of the tyres as well. And as I said earlier on, Lauda is brilliant at pacing himself.
Yes, that's right, Murray. The turbo cars are harder on tyres for two reasons, both working against them. One, of course, is obviously their extra power, which puts more strain through the tyres, and also because largely the cars are heavier, and so they work the tyres that much harder. And, of course, with the competitive situation of the tyre war that exists, everybody's running the most marginal compounds that they can, and I think Lauda was able to run a fairly soft compounded tyre, or was hoping to in the race, and this should tell later on. His problem, of course, being that far down, is that he's going to have to work hard to get people out of his way, because as we've already seen just in the opening laps of the race, overtaking is very difficult here.
There are 1.1 seconds between the first four men, and they are, you see them now, Villeneuve, Arnoux, Prost, Patrese coming towards us. Keke Rosberg is still well up, and look at the Marlboros and the Alfa Romeos in the background with identical colour schemes, and there is Piquet. Piquet is going through and taking Keke Rosberg. So now the two Brabhams are virtually together. Behind the Renaults, we have a change of place there. The red Ferrari on the left, the greatest name in motor racing over the years. They have won more Grand Prix than anybody else. And Gilles Villeneuve, the French-Canadian, there is a replay of Nelson Piquet, the world champion, moving up to 5th place ahead of Keke Rosberg, who finished in 5th place in the South African Grand Prix. And we're going to complete now lap 5 out of 63 as they come surging round the right-hander down the short straight, which goes into the swinging right-hander, and it's still Villeneuve, Arnoux, Prost, Patrese, Piquet and Rosberg, the first 6.
Well, it looks as if the people following Villeneuve has got a little bit of a train behind him. It's not quite like the Spanish Grand Prix last year, when people will remember that Villeneuve had a really ill-handling car, but with the power that he'd got, nobody could pass him, and he got this great train behind him. An outstanding driving performance, but there's no doubt that the Renaults look very comfortable behind him and will be looking for a way around, and I think it's true to say that certainly both Brabham drivers are being quite seriously held up by the turbos through the twisty section of the circuit. And look, Patrese, I think, got through, but will he hold it down the straight? Of course, he hasn't got the power. Prost made a little bit of a mistake then. In fact, both Brabhams got through. Patrese and Piquet managed to get through, and they've held it down the straight. It doesn't look to me as if, in fact, it looks as if maybe Prost's got a problem, because would have expected him to have come past just on power.
Well, a change then on lap 6 out of 63, just about 1/10 race distance, and the Brabhams are beginning to show their form. Gordon Murray, the brilliant bearded South African designer for the Brabham team, has redesigned the Brabham, and this is the D version. And look at the way Patrese and Piquet, there is the world champion, are closing up.
Yes, I suspect Prost's got a problem, because he's not only having dropped those paces, he seems to have dropped back a bit since then as well. We'll just try and keep an eye on him. Yes, the gap's widening all the time, so there's some sort of a problem with Prost's car, I would say.
Between Villeneuve, the leader, and Piquet, 2.1 seconds, and the race order, look at it, there is Villeneuve leading Arnoux in 3rd position, his highest place ever in a Brabham in his 2nd Grand Prix. The Italian Riccardo Patrese, who drove for the Arrows team for 4 years until this year, is in 3rd position. Then the world champion Brazilian Nelson Piquet is in 4th place. Those 4 are pulling away now from Alain Prost and Keke Rosberg, and as James has said, it looks as though Alain Prost, the man who has superbly, in his very short career, last year won 3 Grand Prix and another one again this year because he won in South Africa, is dropping back a bit, but the first 6 are still separated by considerably less than 5 seconds on lap 7. As we look at Patrese, now starting to challenge René Arnoux, even on the fast part here. The Brabham is clearly handling superbly. Watch the white Brabham then challenge René Arnoux in the turbocharged Renault. The Renault has been much modified, and this, we're approaching the point now where Patrese got past on the previous lap, and there is Prost in the background.
Yes, Patrese is challenging very hard, but of course he's got his work cut out, because he's got to not only get past, which is difficult enough, he's got to put a little bit of ground between himself and Arnoux and the Renault to protect himself, to protect his position when he gets to the long straight. He's climbing all over him in the slow section, but he hasn't as yet really looked like he can get past. I think it'll need a little bit of a mistake or a problem, but of course the interesting thing, one can only speculate. There's nothing visibly wrong with Prost's car. I suspect the most likely candidate, although it's pretty early in the race, is that his tyres may be going off. They're running a marginal compound. If they've overheated just a little, he'll lose quite a lot of adhesion, and that slow dropping back that he's doing could be that. And if that's the case, of course, then one's got to look for it to happen on Arnoux's car as well, because they're likely to be running the same tyres. So we must watch them with interest, just to see if we can find out what's wrong.
Well, what a superb charger Gilles Villeneuve is, and watch the way Nelson Piquet now is right with Patrese, who is in third position. Gilles Villeneuve has now actually got about 4 car lengths between himself and René Arnoux. By the way, Jacques Laffite has gone into the pits. He only qualified in 24th position, and the Talbot Ligier team certainly seem to have given up here at Brazil. There's a great air of despondency. It is rumoured that the Ligier are breaking with Talbot and are going to have a new engine, which will mean back to the Ford Cosworth. But there is the charger, 30-year-old Gilles Villeneuve from Quebec, although he now lives in Monaco. This is his 65th Grand Prix, this ex-Formula Atlantic and snowmobile champion of Canada, who has now completed 8 laps in this 63-lap Grand Prix here at Brazil. And Gilles Villeneuve has got 6 Grand Prix victories behind him. Now, it's getting to be critical, because it was suggested that because of the weight and the power and the heat here at Brazil, that these much heavier Ferraris of Villeneuve and Pironi, who I remind you spun out of contention some little while ago, were only going to be able to do about 15 laps and maybe less before they had to come in and get new tyres, which was a problem that faced Villeneuve, albeit with a different make of tyre, all last season. But it doesn't seem to be facing him at the moment. So it is still Villeneuve, Arnoux, Patrese, Prost. Those are the first 4 together. Piquet, and Piquet right in, and he's going through. Nelson Piquet, the world champion, with Prost dropping back. Nelson Piquet is past Riccardo Patrese, his teammate, a beautifully timed manoeuvre, and on lap 9 out of 63 is going to set about closing the gap as Patrese re-challenges. There he goes. There's Piquet going through on the replay past Riccardo Patrese. And now where is Piquet in relation, as we rejoin the race live, to René Arnoux, who can place? This is the end of lap 9. And Nelson Piquet, the world champion, who made an appalling gaffe here last year at Brazil, because Bruno Giacomelli, the fastest lap so far at 118 miles an hour, and that's significant. Bruno Giacomelli in the Romeo is way down on our lap charts. In fact, as we watch this developing battle between Piquet and Arnoux, Giacomelli, who is number 23, is way down. And look at this now. This is the twisty bit of the circuit where Nelson Piquet's skill and Gordon Murray's skill as a designer really tells, because Piquet is right underneath the rear wing almost of the second place man, René Arnoux' turbocharged Renault, challenging for second position. And if Piquet can get ahead of Arnoux and start to challenge Gilles Villeneuve, the race leader, Piquet's countrymen will go absolutely bananas, I promise you that. The sight of a Brazilian crowd with a Brazilian hero at the front is something to see. Let's watch. And let's very quickly pick up the order. There it is, 5th position still Alain Prost, 6th position is Keke Rosberg. That's an old caption, don't forget that's several laps out of date, and as I talk to you now on lap 11 and you watch the race leader Villeneuve, here is confirmation, the number 27 Villeneuve is leading René Arnoux, right behind Arnoux, and there he is Nelson Piquet. Then in 4th position, it is Riccardo Patrese. In 5th position, it is Alain Prost. In 6th position, it is Keke Rosberg. Then behind Rosberg is teammate Carlos Reutemann in 7th place, just out of the points. In 8th position, and this is interesting, Niki Lauda starting to come up, and Niki Lauda is just ahead of 9th position man John Watson as we look there at the Alfa Romeo of number 22, Andrea De Cesaris, who was very quick in practice. And is that a portend of tyre trouble throughout the field? That's the first car that's been into the pits. It's happened on lap 10, which is just about the time it was forecast that tyre troubles might start to affect, and off goes Elio De Angelis. Elio De Angelis in the new Lotus 91 has run across the grass there, as coming towards us, the race leader, lap 11. The interesting point is not so much who is leading. We've got this constant reference point of Gilles Villeneuve, the Canadian, French-Canadian from Quebec in the turbocharged 126C Ferrari, completing there his 11th lap. Just about 1/6, just over 1/6 race distance. And the interesting point is the way the Brabham 49D, BT 49D, of Nelson Piquet, car number 5, and you're looking at it, it's on the right now, is in relation to Arnoux, and all the time Piquet is just nudging back a millimetre here, a millimetre there, but René Arnoux, number 16, who has very much got a reputation to uphold, because it has been suggested that the Renault team were getting slightly disenchanted with the diminutive Frenchman and were going to offer his seat to Jan Lammers, the Dutchman, because not only is Jan Lammers a fine driver, but commercialism enters, and Renault have a very fine business in Holland. Now, Piquet is this, and Patrese is holding the fort magnificently too. He's let Piquet through. And imagine yourself in one of these cars, very, very stiff suspension in order to keep those skirts as close to the road as possible and maximize the downforce and therefore the loading on the tires and therefore the grip on the road. So therefore the suspension has to be very stiff, and as a result of that the drivers take a terrible pounding, very bumpy circuit. And as I said earlier on, it is enormously hot at Rio as we complete lap 12.
Villeneuve seems to be just edging away a little bit from Arnoux in the Renault, and of course that must be frustrating both the Brabham drivers a lot at the moment. Piquet is doing everything he can to find a way around, but he's not really looking as if he'll find a way. So he's challenging there, he's getting close, but he's undoubtedly being held up by the Renault. It'd be interesting to see if he can get the Renault out of the way, what he can do about the Ferrari. Meantime, of course, Prost is holding back Rosberg, who's leading the rest of the challenge from behind, but of course he's being very frustrated in that he's being taken backwards a bit by Prost, and of course he'll want to at least get at the Brabhams. There's Piquet right behind the Ferrari, but I don't think he's got the power. He was well placed last lap to have a go. That's rather an unfortunate shot of the track. He's tucked right up in the slipstream. He's perfectly placed, but he just hasn't quite got that oomph to carry him past. It's only a slight dab of the brakes going into that corner. There's a yellow flag waving there. I don't know if somebody's off on the outside of the track. I can't see any sign of an incident there.
Well, there's two very interesting things. The first is that Keke Rosberg is closed right up with Riccardo Patrese, who is in 4th position. The second is that we just caught a flash of Carlos Reutemann coming out of the slipstream of Alain Prost to try and pass him, in which case there will be 2 Williams cars in the top 6. Never forget that in this World Championship Series, the first 6 finishers get World Championship points. And off there is one of the Rothman cars, and number 18 is the car of Raul Boesel, the Brazilian driver. He won't be best pleased, and nor will his countryman. And there you see Keke Rosberg taking a look along the side of Riccardo Patrese's car. The race order is still Villeneuve, Arnoux in 2nd place that we're looking at in the yellow Renault. 3rd is Nelson Piquet. 4th is Riccardo Patrese. There he is. 5th, right behind the Italian in the Brabham, is Keke Rosberg, the Finnish driver in the Williams. And 6th, it's either Prost or Reutemann. And we'll watch out for it and let you know as soon as we see the whole lot coming down the straight. Yes,
there's no doubt that there's the yellow flag waving again for some reason. I still can't see any obvious incident. But there's no doubt that the Ford cars are being well held up, because when I said to you before that Rosberg was stuck behind Prost, he'd moved up so quickly I hadn't noticed him arrive on the back once he'd got by Prost's Renault. Whoops! Oh, Piquet having a little look then, but it's just too quick for him. He's going to have to find, if he's going to make a passing manoeuvre, he's going to have to do it in this area of the track that they're on now, which would give him enough breathing space to get away through the twisted section before he gets to the main straight. But hit this corner or the next one, but of course they're really not very practical places to try and attack.
Those of you who are technically interested and cynically inclined will be amused and interested to know that the British cars, and in particular the Williams and McLarens, are actually allegedly running below the weight limit, and that is Derek Daly's car, the Theodore, and he's driving in his first race in the new car. And again, Keke Rosberg is trying to challenge Patrese for 4th position. But I was telling you that the British cars are running below the weight limit because they allegedly have water-cooled brakes. They have a big container which holds a lot of water, which they solemnly top up at the end of the race in order to bring the car back to the weight limit. And we were worried that there was going to be a political uproar about that, but mercifully there hasn't been, although it was rumoured that Ferrari might be protesting the British cars at the end of this race. And there you see the difference between Villeneuve and Piquet, 2.146 seconds on lap 15 out of 63. Villeneuve coming towards us, and then a solid train of Formula One Grand Prix cars with Arnoux 2nd. Piquet 3rd, Patrese 4th, Rosberg 5th. Behind them in 6th position is Alain Prost. Right behind him is Carlos Reutemann in 7th place. Closing up on Reutemann in 8th place is Niki Lauda. Behind Niki Lauda in 9th position is John Watson. In 10th position it is Nigel Mansell in the Lotus 91. In 11th position it is Bruno Giacomelli in the Alfa Romeo. And in 12th place it's Salazar in the ATS, and that is on lap 15. Well, it looks as though the pundits about the tyres and the Ferraris were wrong.
Well, hang on, that's one of the Alphas in the pits, back again.
De Cesaris again.
More tyres by the look of things, so I don't know what sort of problems they got with that. Yes, I think, of course, one can't tell. If anything, the Renaults look to be suffering from a tyre problem, because the early pace seems to have gone out of Arnoux, and Prost's early pace went only after about 4 or 5 laps. So the Brabhams at the moment look very comfortable. Meantime, Villeneuve is getting quietly away, much to the frustration of everybody else. But quite honestly, it's a long way to go. The turbos are suspect in the heat, both on reliability and on producing their full quota of power all the time. And if I was going to have a bet right now, I'd be betting on the Brabhams to come through in the end. It's a long way to fend them off, and there's no doubt that they're running a lot slower than they could do if they had a clear track in front of them. Piquet is well placed now. I think he might have a late stab, but he just hadn't quite got the momentum to carry him through, and there isn't enough braking there, unfortunately, for them. It would be better served for Piquet if that was a much slower corner at the end of the straight and he could really come by on the brakes.
And all the time that Arnoux, Piquet, Patrese and Rosberg are fighting each other, Villeneuve there is clearing off, metaphorically, and actually, literally speaking, the gap now is 3.7 seconds between the car that we're looking at, René Arnoux, number 16, and Villeneuve, number 27 in the Ferrari, as again Patrese challenges, and again Arnoux shuts the door. He's entitled to Piquet challenges, and it's lap 16 completed now. Arnoux, Piquet right behind him, Patrese, Rosberg coming out of Patrese's slipstream and trying to move up into fourth position, and he's going through. It looks as though we're going to see a change here with the Williams taking over fourth place from the Brabham.
Yes, and that was the old Patrese then, very aggressive in that overtaking situation. He started to move in towards Rosberg in quite a threatening fashion, but I think, yes, Rosberg did manage to hold on, both very hard. Aggressive drivers, quite a hard spectacle when they get together and get set too.
Well, 33-year-old Keke Rosberg, the third of the three cars that we're looking at now, is really charging because he's right up with Nelson Piquet, who is in third position. And Rosberg has at last, after seasons of endeavour and driving, first of all, in the Wolf car, whose place he took James Hunt's place, and there is Piquet through. Nelson Piquet, for the last several laps, has tried that manoeuvre and now he's succeeded.
Yes, that's a wonderful... Yeah, of course, the crowd went mad on that. Brazilian hero, current world champion. Outstanding piece of driving by Piquet. He's been lining that up for some laps, and I don't think it'll take him very long at all to catch the Ferrari now. And what's more, he'll be well pleased to have... Oh, and Rosberg's got through as well. We didn't see how that happened, but he was right behind the Renault. We've got an action replay now. There is Piquet nipping out beautifully. He'd been practicing that for several laps and through very comfortably. And that's Patrese now having a go to get past the Renault. So Piquet won't be so happy to see that Rosberg nipped through as well, but Piquet's already establishing a big lead and going after the Ferrari. He then, of course, will come upon exactly the same problem, possibly a little bit worse. I think the Ferrari is even quicker than the Renault down the straight.
Well, the overjoyed girl in the ponytail hairdo that you saw was Nelson Piquet's girlfriend, not unnaturally overjoyed at the fact that her man has got through into second place ahead. Third place ahead. And there goes Piquet, second position, ahead of Arnoux. And so now on lap 18, and off goes one... Is that a Marlboro or an Alfa Romeo? It looks like Bruno Giacomelli. It's Bruno Giacomelli's car. And the gap between Villeneuve and Piquet is now some 4 seconds. There's Villeneuve lapping Mauro Baldi, the Italian driver, in his first Grand Prix, because don't forget that Brian Hinton failed to qualify. And now you see the gap between Nelson Piquet on lap 18, and the order is on lap 18, Villeneuve leading Piquet, with in third position Keke Rosberg. In fourth position, down to fourth position, goes Arnoux. Fifth is Patrese, and in sixth position Prost. In seventh position is Reutemann. In eighth position is Lauda. In ninth position Watson. Then 10th Mansell. In 11th position Giacomelli. And in 12th position it's still Salazar, as we watch the world champion starting her charge as they complete lap 18 on this 63 lap. The gap between Villeneuve and Piquet, as I stop the watch, is now 2.8 seconds. So Piquet is gaining, and in third position Keke Rosberg is pulling away from Patrese.
We've got a terrific fight. Yes, once the tyres have gone a reasonable distance, the crisis point sort of goes, because the tyres run hottest, obviously, when they're newest with most rubber on. And so once they've got the rubber on, and there's Piquet come right up behind the Ferrari, as we expected. But of course, that's only the start of the problem. The big problem now is how he's going to deal with potentially passing him. But he closed the gap pretty quickly, so it's fairly obvious that if and when he can get by, as long as the cars remain healthy, he'll be able to get away. But of course, Rosberg must be a considerable problem to him. He's driving extremely well, as generally expected. His talents have been fairly long recognised. It was just a question of getting the right car, as of course for so many people. That's one of the Ligiers.
Reddy Cheever.
Eddie Cheever just pulled off onto the grass, no apparent reason, but probably a breakdown.
Well, the Talbot Ligier cars with their V12 Matra engines were very, very unhappy in practicing. We're looking at the battle between Villeneuve, the leader, and Piquet in second place as they complete lap 20, and they're starting to close up now on tail enders, and it's going to become very critical all of a sudden about how cleanly the leaders can close up on and get past the tail enders. The tail ender at the moment is clearly one of the yellow ATS cars, and it will therefore presumably be Winkelhock, because we know that Eliseo Salazar, the Chilean driver, is well up in the field. There is the last car, and there are the first three, and they are on lap 21. And look at Rosberg. Rosberg closing up and trying to get through on the inside. Now Rosberg goes round the outside, and it's Piquet, the world champion, that he's challenging, and Piquet is right with Villeneuve. What a magnificent Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes, we can now see that Piquet was ideally placed coming out of that corner, but it looks to me as if the Ferrari is still pulling away, despite the fact he's giving Piquet a nice hole in the air to go through. He's pulled away a large amount, and so the Ferrari has got considerably more power, or more straight line speed anyway, than the Renault had. So the manoeuvre that Piquet used to pass René Arnoux doesn't look as if it's going to work here. He's going to have to find a new way to get round, and of course he's got to cover his rear at the same time, because Rosberg's leaping about in his mirrors and ready to pick up any mistake that he might make.
Well, one tail ender lapped, they're closing up on another one, and the three went past the ATS as one. Villeneuve, the Charger, in the Harvey Postlethwaite designed Ferrari with its V6 turbo engine, leads from Piquet and Rosberg.
Yes, once they get amongst the back markers more thoroughly, of course, the potential advantage is always to the man behind, because if a back marker does interfere, Rosberg pressing away still, if a back marker does interfere, of course, then the only thing that the leader can do is lose his lead if things go wrong for him, and at the same time the guys following are going to be looking for every possible opportunity to nip through if there is any confusion that are created by a back marker. We've got one in front now. This is a situation I couldn't quite see who it was.
It's the Osella of Jean-Pierre Jarier, I think, as Villeneuve goes through, and I can tell you that Niki Lauda is in trouble on our lap chart. Niki Lauda is dropping down through the field, although we're concentrating on the first three, and in the background, the last of the cars you can see is the fourth place man, Riccardo Patrese. Lap 22 then, and it's Villeneuve leading, Piquet second, Rosberg third. You can see them. In fourth position it is Patrese, in fifth position it is Prost, in sixth position it is Watson, in seventh place it is René Arnoux, in eighth position it is Mansell, in ninth place it is Carlos Reutemann slipping back, in 10th position slipping back Niki Lauda, in 11th place Salazar, who's moving up, in 12th place it is Didier Pironi, who has come up one place after spinning off earlier on. The leaders, lap 22. Villeneuve, Piquet, Rosberg, Ferrari, Brabham, Williams. In the background, the second Brabham of Riccardo Patrese. Very bumpy, very demanding, especially at the end of the long straight, which is some 3/4 of a mile long, and which leads into the resurfaced but still appallingly bumpy, long, sweeping left-hander. Villeneuve, Piquet. Remember that Nelson Piquet has fought his way up from 5th position. Now, is he going to get through and take the lead from Villeneuve as they're starting to close up on another tail-ender? The French-Canadian in the Ferrari leads the Brazilian in the Brabham, leads the Finn in the Williams, and this is one of the last races that the magnificent FW Frank Williams 07 Williams will be driving in, because the new FW 08, the Patrick Head designed car, is going to be appearing at the Imola Grand Prix, the San Marino Grand Prix, after the next one at Long Beach. And Keke Rosberg, the third man that we're looking at now, was out testing it at Brands Hatch before he went to Brazil and was sensationally fast. And it's going to be a real challenger for the turbos. But at the present moment, the turbos that we didn't expect to do so well at Brazil because they haven't got the power advantage. There's Rosberg. Rosberg is trying to get through and he's through. Magnificent. Keke Rosberg on lap 24 is through into second place ahead of Nelson Piquet.
And he's just lost it again. Yes, he just lost it again. He went into that corner. He caught Piquet napping a bit then, I think. I think Piquet was a little bit slow out of the previous corner. Rosberg came at him very well. And unfortunately, having done an exceptionally good maneuver, I think he got a little bit carried away, went into the corner a little bit quickly when he'd already won it, and going wide as a result of that allowed Piquet back in. Here we're going to see it in action replay. You see Rosberg dives out, Piquet comes over, realizes his mistake, tries to squeeze him, and in fact probably succeeds in squeezing him enough onto the inside that Rosberg slid wide as he went into the corner.
Take that, says Rosberg to Piquet. Oh, no, you don't, my Finnish friend, says Piquet, and takes back the second position, which is where he is now. So, no change, but I would be more than surprised, I would be amazed if the Brazilian Grand Prix, which is on lap 24 and which has to run to 63 laps and is therefore only about 1/3 distance completed, finishes with these three in the same positions. Well, Villeneuve is past Jarier and Piquet and now Rosberg.
Yes, Rosberg really is putting on an outstanding performance because he's driving with terrific aggression. He's being very, very brave, but not silly. There we've got one of the arrows in the pits.
That's Mauro Baldi, the Italian driver, in the pits for tyres, presumably.
Well, no, it doesn't look like tyres. They were fiddling around with the gearbox or something at the back of the car. I was wondering if it was tyres, but doesn't seem to be. As I say, Rosberg is driving with terrific aggression, but at the same time it looks well controlled and things, and is really showing everybody what an outstanding talent he has.
Niki Lauda, who was in 10th position, is out of the race. He has retired. We haven't seen him on screen, but take my word for it that 3 times world champion Niki Lauda is out of the Brazilian Grand Prix and 10th position, which means to say that now up into 10th position will go Didier Pironi in the Ferrari, the second of the 2 Ferraris, and the first of them is the one you're looking at now, with Nelson Piquet almost sawing the Ferrari's gearbox at the back of it in half with the nose of his Brabham BT49D, which you will notice, unlike the South African Grand Prix, has got aerofoils on the nose. It is a constant battle in World Championship Grand Prix racing these days to get the balance and the downforce distribution right by adjusting the aerofoils at the front and the aerofoil, which is called a wing, at the back of the car. In South Africa, the turbocharged Brabhams didn't have them. Here at Brazil, they have, and the Brabham seems to be handling superlatively well. As for that matter, hats off to Dr. Harvey Postlethwaite, does the carbon fibre chassis Ferrari of Gilles Villeneuve. The first 3 still magnificently together on lap 26. Villeneuve, Piquet, Rosberg, and those 3 are pulling well away now for the battle in the lead from the 4th position man, Riccardo Patrese, who is also clear of 5th position man, Alain Prost. And you'll notice that René Arnoux is now right out of the running, and in 6th position it's John Watson in the Marlboro MP4. So lap 26, Villeneuve leads Piquet, 3rd Rosberg, 4th Patrese, 5th is Prost, and 6th is Watson. You've been in this situation of heat and bumps. What's it like?
Rosberg just having a go, but I don't think he's close enough. No, it's very, very hard physically, Murray. I mean, particularly now. I haven't driven the current generation of Grand Prix car, where they've taken practically all the suspension away from it, because, of course, the car it's in an attempt to get the chassis not to move up and down, so they keep the skirts in contact with the road in order to get their downforce. But of course it does make it very, very uncomfortable. The G-forces are really huge now, and it's getting to a point in Grand Prix racing where they're getting very close to the limit of Piquet nibbling away, but he just not quite in position. Oh, he's practically leaning on the Ferrari, but of course they get to a straight and the Ferrari just squirts away. It's really got a huge quantity of power, but Rosberg is challenging again. The same corner that he had to go last time. Yes, he's inside, and this time he's probably through because he stayed beside and didn't attack it so heavily, and he's beautifully done it. Now, can Rosberg do anything about the Ferrari? I think Rosberg's probably the slowest on the straight of these three drivers, or cars rather, and I suspect that he'll be in trouble with Piquet attacking him down the straight. Probably not this lap, because Piquet's dropped back a little bit, but when Piquet gets back on terms.
And up into 7th place has gone Nigel Mansell, the Birmingham-born Englishman in the Lotus 91, its first race, up into 7th place. So a change amongst the first three on lap 27. There is Piquet. This is a replay. Watch Keke Rosberg on the left going through and taking the second position that he momentarily held earlier on from world champion Nelson Piquet. And now there is, in terms of this Brazilian Grand Prix, an enormous gap between second and third. I say in terms of this Brazilian Grand Prix because it's been one of the closest battles for the lead that we have seen continuously for a very long time.
It's a real problem, just going back to the problems of racing and the physical side for the drivers. It's getting to the point now that there is a doctor who travels around. He was certainly concerned with the state of some of the drivers after Grand Prix last year. And after the race in Vegas, I must say I was really horrified with the way some of the drivers looked. They were suffering, without any doubt, from quite advanced stages of exhaustion. Even Alan Jones, one of the strongest men who's been in Grand Prix racing for many years, and the toughest, too, who won the race, which is usually the easiest job because you're out there taking it fairly easily in front with a big lead. Even Alan Jones looked completely grey and quite unwell. So it is becoming a problem. It's Grand Prix racing now is from half distance onwards. Most of the drivers are in a state of fairly advanced exhaustion and struggling to hang on. Piquet closing up again, but Rosberg closing up, but to no avail when we get onto the straight. Now watch that Ferrari out-accelerate. He's pulling away already. He's pulled 2 lengths in the first 150 yards.
Well, our viewers in Australia may not have the hero Alan Jones in a Williams battling for the lead, which they got so used to over the years, but it's the next best thing. It's his replacement, Keke Rosberg, the Finnish driver, driving the race of his life without a doubt. There you see the positions on lap 27, and we're now actually on lap 28, and you see that John Watson is in 6th position. You do not see that Nigel Mansell is in 7th place, but take my word for it, he is, as Keke Rosberg challenges. No, he's just having a look, and of course, Gilles Villeneuve is under terrific pressure. He's in the lead, but he can see in the mirrors on either side of his windscreen that Williams getting bigger all the time, and he knows that if he goes as much as an inch out of line, Rosberg will dart through and into the lead of the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes, Villeneuve kept over to the inside, going into that corner before the pits then, after Rosberg had showed him his nose, as it were, on the previous corner. And I think Villeneuve will be well warned. He knows that he can afford to use blocking tactics now, because so long as he can block his opposition into a corner, all he has to do when he gets to come out of the corner is put his foot down, and there's nothing that they can do. But at the same time, Rosberg is probably the best man around at the moment to fight his way past in that situation. So if anybody's going to get past, it should be Rosberg, except that now you see Piquet is very well placed going onto the straight to get the toe from Rosberg, and Piquet could duck out and have a go at Rosberg, who's protecting the inside, making Piquet go the long way around. They're going in absolutely side by side,
and he
Piquet did it round the outside. Exceptionally good piece of driving. It shows the speed of the Brabham on the straight, though.
What a race, and cast your mind, those of you who are Grand Prix enthusiasts, back to the 1981 Spanish Grand Prix as we see a replay of world champion Nelson Piquet challenging Keke Rosberg for second place and taking it. Rosberg, as James said, made him go round the outside, but there's an indication of how well that chassis of Piquet's Brabham and the tyres put the car down onto the road, and Piquet is right back with Villeneuve. And I was saying, cast your mind back to last year's Spanish Grand Prix over the Jarama circuit, which is even tighter and twistier than this one, where Gilles Villeneuve in the turbocharged Ferrari got into the front, and notwithstanding the fact that there were better handling cars behind him, he just hung on and refused to give way, as a result of which he crossed the line to win with 4 cars tucked right up behind each other's gearboxes in what must have been just about the closest finish of Grand Prix racing of all time. And we could get a repeat because Riccardo Patrese is actually closing up, and Piquet's going through. Piquet's going to, and off goes Villeneuve, off. Villeneuve spins right off, and we have a new race leader, world champion Brazilian Nelson Piquet.
Yes, that was a panic mistake by Villeneuve. He was panicked into that. Piquet did very well. Here we see it again. Piquet goes to go around the outside. Now, there's no need for Villeneuve to panic, but he's got his wheels on the grass. Of course, then the brakes don't work. And actually, Piquet was quite lucky that Villeneuve didn't take him with him, because he only just missed him, went shot right across his bows. But that was definitely a panic mistake by Villeneuve, who'd been doing so well at protecting his lead. And now, of course, Piquet's got a clear run, except, of course, he's got Rosberg to think about, who, in the early part of the race, appeared to have slightly less speed on his own than Piquet, but things can change, and we'll wait and see how they settle.
Well, will the Brazilian crowd go mad at the end of this lap 30 when Nelson Piquet bursts out of the left-hander and into the sight of the 80,000 spectators packed into the grandstand? Yes, they will, and there is a crestfallen, no doubt heartbroken, Gilles Villeneuve walking in after a very determined and quite superb drive. Well, unpredictably, it wasn't the tyres that took Villeneuve off the road. It was a driver error which Nelson Piquet goaded him into. And now Piquet is sprinting away. He's got the lead. He's got a clear circuit in front of him, except for the car that he's closing up on now, which looks like Slim Borgud's Tyrrell car, the Swedish driver. Yes, it is. And now Nelson Piquet leading Keke Rosberg second. Not far behind him, Patrese. The Renault of Prost is still fourth. Watson in fifth, and Nigel Mansell, therefore, in the first drive in the Lotus 91, moves up into sixth position. In seventh position, it is Eliseo Salazar. In eighth position, it is Didier Pironi. In ninth place, it is Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell, the teammate of Borgud that Nelson Piquet has just passed on his 31st lap. And we are almost exactly, in fact, exactly at this point, at half distance of this Brazilian Grand Prix, where we have seen Didier Pironi drop out of the running with a spin, a very clean start, which Villeneuve took the lead at straight away. Villeneuve held the lead for half the race distance with this enormous scrap between Piquet, Patrese, Rosberg, Prost and Arnoux surging on behind him. Arnoux right out of the running, the man who won the Brazilian Grand Prix in his turbocharged Renault in 1980. Alain Prost, who won the South African Grand Prix, is in fourth position. And for the moment, and I suspect it is only for the moment, as we watch number 6, Keke Rosberg, in second place, Nelson Piquet holds a secure lead. Prost, there is, I think, Jarier in the Osella. Behind him is Salazar. The enormous crowd at the Jarapagua circuit. It's about 20 miles away from Rio. And number 10 is Manfred Winkelhock in the ATS, not Salazar. And Winkelhock is well down the field. He's in about 16th position at the moment. But that is no mean achievement. This ex-Formula 2 driver, it's the second of the two cars that we're looking at now, is driving in his first real Grand Prix. He's moved up from the junior formula up into World Championship. And that's a Brabham that spun off. Which one is it? He's spinning
I think
right
it's Patrese, yes, number 2.
Riccardo Patrese. He was in 3rd position and has obviously had his place taken by Alain Prost, and it's almost there. There is Patrese, and behind him, number 12, is Mansell. Now, Mansell was in 6th position, so Patrese must have gone down to 5th position, and he's now got Nigel Mansell right in his wheel tracks.
Yes, most unfortunate was Patrese, because having made the spin, he now compounds the felony by spinning it again. So that wasted him a lot of time, all that manoeuvring, that sort of second complementary spin that he threw in as well. Mansell, you see coming around in the background there in the replay. He managed, I think, to get away just in front of Mansell, so we have to see how they settle down again.
Race order, lap 34 with that change. The leader, number 1, Piquet. 2nd is Rosberg. In 3rd position now, it is Prost. In 4th position, it is Watson. In 5th position, it is Patrese. In 6th position, it is Mansell. And in 7th place, it's Salazar. There are Prost and Watson battling for 3rd position. In the yellow and white Renault, the South African Grand Prix winner, Alain Prost. There, number 7, John Watson, who spun off mightily at that very corner in the wet at the Brazilian Grand Prix last year, when he was going extremely well. And as you see, he is now just, 2/10 of a second behind Alain Prost. There is the Frenchman, who is being very freely tipped, is Alain Prost, to be world champion this year. Winner in South Africa. He's still very much in the points here at Brazil. And there are some although there are some slower circuits to come, like Imola, we get onto the quick ones later on in the year. Brands Hatch is very quick for the British Grand Prix this year. The Österreich Ring, as we look at Nelson Piquet in the lead, the Österreich Ring in Austria is very quick, and that's where the turbocharged Renaults will really come into their own. And did you see how very hard the 2nd place man, Keke Rosberg, is trying? He really got a fishtail on there in the background, and he's closing up on Nelson Piquet. The gap is closing between the leader Piquet and the 2nd place man Rosberg.
That's right, and also another interesting development is that Patrese has gone into the pits. Now there's Patrese in the pits. We don't know what he's doing. He's come in very slowly, so it's a question of whether whatever sent him into the pits caused his spin, or whether he damaged the car in his spin. But my suspicions immediately run to tyres, and I think Patrese might have been into the pits for the 2nd time then. So he's done a lap, having gone out of the pits. Now, if it was tyres, of course, that may mean that Piquet is running into tyre trouble, because it's all rather strange. He went leaping away from Rosberg once they got rid of Villeneuve so peremptorily, but Rosberg has now caught it all back again. So maybe Patrese, maybe Piquet is suffering from a little bit of lack of adhesion that afflicted his teammate.
Well, we've just had, while you were talking, James, we've just had a message thrust in here to say that Patrese's trouble seems to be fatigue. He is absolutely flaked out. I was talking earlier on about this bumpy circuit and the effect it had on the drivers, compounded by this 30-degree plus centigrade heat at Rio, and Patrese is said to be absolutely worn out. Which is very significant indeed, because it's half race distance. There is still nearly as far to go as they have already gone. But, of course, Nelson Piquet, being Brazilian, should be able to cope with it, although he hasn't been to Brazil very much lately.
Yes, of course, the problem with that is not just the physical and muscular side of being thrown about in the car all the time. Yes, you see Rosberg. Now, Rosberg's a tough lad, and he may well be able to last the distance. But exhaustion is really a problem because, of course, it's 30 degrees outside, but it's a great deal hotter than that inside the cockpit, and hotter still inside their driving suits, which are very thick. There's 3 or 4 layers of insulation now, which, of course, is to keep you cool in a fire, but it keeps you jolly hot when there isn't a fire going. And dehydration becomes a very real problem because they sweat huge quantities in there.
Well, just imagine what that is like, and they've still got a very long way to go. Nelson Piquet at the end of the Caesars Palace Grand Prix at Las Vegas last year, which, like the Jarapagua circuit here at Rio, is a left-handed anti-clockwise circuit, had to be lifted out of the car. There is Patrese, there's the answer. That is fatigue, very definitely. Patrese being carried to his pit, off will come his helmet, and as I was saying earlier on, at the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, Piquet, the leader that we're looking at now, actually had to be lifted out of the car, and because his neck muscles on that side of his head were so weak, he could hardly hold his head up.
Yes, well, I've seen drivers being lifted out of the car after Grand Prix before. I remember in the Brazilian Grand Prix back in the days when it was in Sao Paulo that Ronnie Peterson had to be taken to hospital to be revived with fluids to be taken intravenously and salt and sugar to get him going again. But I've never seen a driver actually stop in the race just purely on the grounds of exhaustion, and that seems very strange, because he could have always slowed down a bit and just taken it a little bit easier, one would have thought. But you never know what's happening.
Well, there's something happening down in sixth position, because up into sixth position in only his second Grand Prix has gone Manfred Winkelhock, the German driver from Stuttgart, ex-Formula 2, driving the very, very much improved ATS. And that's a very considerable achievement. And so is that of Keke Rosberg, the second of these two cars. Lap 37, this is the leader. Number 1, Nelson Piquet. Second, right behind him, Keke Rosberg. Third, Alain Prost. Fourth is John Watson. In fifth position now, it's Mansell. Sixth position, Winkelhock. Seventh place is Michele Alboreto. Eighth place is Slim Borgood. Ninth position is Eliseo Salazar. So both the ATS cars are doing extremely well, with Winkelhock up in sixth position. Alistair Caldwell is a man that must take a considerable amount of credit for the ATS car's success. There is Prost. We haven't seen him for a long time. Alain Prost in third position, behind Keke Rosberg and Nelson Piquet, and a long way behind. And you can see there is a clear circuit behind the Frenchman before John Watson, and there he is in the Marlboro MP4, even the John Barnard designed car, headed up by Ron Dennis and Teddy Mayer in the McLaren International organisation. John Watson, who won the British Grand Prix at Silverstone last year after a couple of years in the wilderness. He's won 2 Grand Prix because he won in Austria some years ago in the Penske car. And there goes the Ulster man, John Watson, who lives in Bognor Regis and in London. And he's on his way now in fourth position, trying to close the gap between himself and Prost. But John Watson that we're looking at now, there is Prost, and Watson was much closer to Prost than this a few laps ago. So either Watson is tiring, or Alain Prost has found a new lease of life from himself or the Renault, and things are getting comparatively spread out on lap 38 out of 63.
Yes, the relative performances seem to be going up and down a bit like a yo-yo, and with the evidence of what we've already seen, of course, from Riccardo Patrese, it does begin to point as if exhaustion may well become the overriding factor in determining the result of this race. It may just be a who can hang on and just literally have the strength to hold his head up and see where he's going and get the car to the line, because the way they're, as I say, bouncing about at different speeds all the time does tend one to think that they're all suffering quite badly already. Prost has pulled in a huge amount on Watson suddenly.
Well, let us consider the characters and the personalities and the likely stamina of the lead drivers. Nelson Piquet was born and brought up in this climate. He is a Brazilian, and although he has been away from Brazil because of his racing career for some time, I'm hypothesizing that it will be easier for him to keep going. But Keke Rosberg in second place is also, it's not my voice you're hearing, I promise you. Keke Rosberg is also a very, very hard man. But I noticed just before our friend here started talking to us that Alain Prost had not only pulled away from John Watson, but was also closing up on Keke Rosberg. And if only the Brazilian producer would return us to the race, here it is. There is Prost. Now, where is John Watson?
I think certainly, I mean, it's very difficult to analyse sort of physical attributes because different drivers have a different physical output of effort that they put into their driving. But certainly of the personalities involved, the known real hard man, real tough guy there who will survive it all is Alain Prost. He's the smallest of them physically, but he's a really outstanding competitor and a really tough little chap, and I think that he will be amongst the survivors. Rosberg is very strong physically, he's a good hard guy, but I don't know how much output he puts into his driving. For instance, Didier Pironi is a very physical sort of driver, and I would think that if he were up there in the lead, he'd be suffering by now because he sweats a huge amount, puts every muscle in his body into getting the car around, and that, of course, is a disadvantage. One needs a slightly more economical style. Piquet, at the same time, is certainly, personality-wise, suspect under a lot of pressure physically, and is more likely to not collapse, but to go at it. I think if things are really hard for him and he's really suffering, I don't think he'd go at it with the same resolve that Rosberg and certainly Prost would attack the problem. But at the moment he's doing very well and he's pulling away a little bit from Rosberg, but it's still the old yo-yo situation by the look of things.
Well, Nelson Piquet has just passed and lapped for the second time Italian Mauro Baldi in the Arrows car, driving in his first Grand Prix. And as soon as I can see the two of them together, I'll give you a gap between Nelson Piquet and Rosberg. The answer is 1.8 seconds, and I took it at exactly the same point on the previous lap. And there, that's Salazar coming in, and Salazar was well up. He was in 9th position, the Chilean driver. He doesn't have the best of luck, does Eliseo Salazar, who made his name in the Aurora Championship the year before last. Now there's Piquet. Let's take the gap now. Now I've lost Keke Rosberg in second place. But Salazar, as I was saying, doesn't have the best of luck. He's really made his name in Grand Prix driving this year. First of all with an inside, and there, the car out of contention there is that of Chico Serra. That's the Brazilian driver, the Fittipaldi car, the only one. And Brazil is not having a very good race, except for the man at the front, of course, because Raul Boesel we saw go out earlier on in his March car. Now Chico Serra, the Brazilian in Emerson Fittipaldi's team. Emerson Fittipaldi, ex-double world champion, 1972 and 1974, who has won the Brazilian Grand Prix in his time, has now seen his driver out, and we are on now, lap 41 out of 63, watching the race leader, Nelson Piquet, who fought his way up to the top so superbly, who harried Gilles Villeneuve, who went off the circuit, and as he completes lap 41, the race order is Piquet, in second place is Rosberg, in third position is Prost, in fourth position is Watson, in fifth position is Mansell, and in sixth place is Winkelhock. Making his charge, he's tactically increasing the gap between himself and Keke Rosberg, and hard and capable as Keke may be, and he certainly is, he doesn't seem to be holding Nelson Piquet, who is about to lap Jarier in the Osella again.
Who doesn't get out of his way, which would be very frustrating for Piquet at this important moment. He's held him up a little bit there, but of course Rosberg, one thing there's no doubt, he is a fighter and he'll fight right till the end. And he's holding on now.
Yes, the gap has come down. It's come down to 2.4 seconds. So probably because Piquet was held up and because, and look at that magnificent view in the background, if you could take your eyes off the cars for just a moment. The Rio area is superb. I must say that this circuit, which is on reclaimed land and includes a vast rubbish tip, is not the most attractive circuit I've ever been to. But now Rosberg is definitely starting to close a little on Piquet.
Yes, unfortunately, you're absolutely right, Murray. they cited the track. It's a little bit out of town anyway in Rio, but they did somehow manage to choose one of the least attractive areas of the sort of general environment of Rio. But if you look around, it's very flat and featureless there, but there's some nice mountains behind, but our camera positions only seem to be able to shoot out to sea.
Well, 26 cars started this 1982 Brazilian Grand Prix at the Rio Autodromo. Only 12 of them are left now. That's an indication of how the demands of the circuit on both the cars and the drivers have really ravaged the entry. We've seen Villeneuve go off enormously spectacularly. We didn't see Niki Lauda. In fact, I don't think we've actually had Niki Lauda in shot for the whole race. There's Rosberg still trying very, very hard indeed in his Patrick Head designed car. We'll take the gap again. It was 2.8 seconds. It's now 2.67. Well, and the gap there between Rosberg and Prost, as you see, is 7.4. So there's still only 10 seconds between the first and third men. And in fourth position, it's still Watson. In fifth, it's Nigel Mansell. And in sixth position, it is Winkelhock, ahead of the seventh place man, Alboreto, and everybody else has been lapped by the leader.
Yes, we certainly have got a very wide open race. Prost is by no means out of contention. And of course, the two lead cars are well in sight of each other, as we can see, and there's plenty of time to go. So we potentially, if we get a bit of a concertina effect, we could have a very spectacular finish to this race.
Interesting thing for the World Championship too, because Prost, by winning the South African Grand Prix, got 9 points. Reutemann is not in the points here at Brazil, nor is Arnoux, nor is Lauda. Rosberg, on the other hand, who finished in 5th place to get 2 points in South Africa, is on his way to get 6 points for 2nd place here at Brazil. So doing a bit of quick and tortuous mental arithmetic, Prost would finish on 13 points if he finishes in 3rd place, and Rosberg would finish on 8 points and would therefore move into 2nd place in the World Championship. But there's still a long way to go, because this is lap 45 with Nelson Piquet that you see leading here ahead of Keke Rosberg, and Piquet hasn't got to do much wrong for Keke Rosberg to be right back with him, and it's still Alain Prost in the turbocharged Renault in 3rd place, ahead of 4th place man John Watson, ahead of 5th place man Nigel Mansell, ahead of 6th place man Manfred Winkelhock. It is still Alboreto in the Tyrrell, and that's a jolly good drive, in 7th position, and the last man not to have been lapped. Whereas in 8th place, Slim Ballgood has been lapped. So, of course, has the 9th place man Jarier, who we've seen lapped at least twice. And in 10th position, it is Mauro Baldi, and the other two are just struggling along in the background. Down the straight, and we are now on lap 45. I just said, incidentally, that Reutemann, who had finished in the points in the South African Grand Prix, was out of the running here in Brazil. Not only out of the running, but seemingly out of the race. We have no sign of him on our lap charts. We have, of course, been looking for him. Our view of the circuit from here is limited, and we haven't had any messages about what has happened to the Argentine driver Carlos Reutemann, 2nd in the World Championship last year and 2nd in South Africa. But all I can tell you for sure, whilst we get messages out to see if we can find out what has happened to the 2nd of the 2 Williams cars, is that Carlos Reutemann is missing, and we are looking at the distinctive red-numbered 15 on the yellow background turbocharged Renault of Frenchman Alain Prost, strongly tipped for the World Championship this year, streaming down the straight on his own in this car, which produces some 550 brake horsepower, is right down to the weight limit without the luxury of the contentious water-cooled brakes. I've just had a message about Reutemann. Interrupt myself to tell you that Reutemann pulled up some laps ago on the course, and we think he may have been involved with some problems with Niki Lauda. So that could explain why both Lauda and Reutemann are off the charts as Nelson Piquet completes lap 46, and there behind him, and if as soon as Rosberg hits that dark patch, and he does so, 2.5 seconds only separates Nelson Piquet, the race leader, from the second place man, Keke Rosberg. There is Alain Prost in third position, and poor René Arnoux, incidentally, whose name almost crossed my lips there, won't have done himself much good in this Brazilian Grand Prix as far as the Renault management were concerned, if it is true, as rumoured, that there is a possibility of him losing his place in the Renault team. It really doesn't matter whether it was René Arnoux' fault, in quotes, or not. The fact is that he seems to be an extraordinarily unlucky driver. There's the gap. 2.553 seconds between number one, the race leader. There he is, Nelson Piquet, and number 6, Keke Rosberg, the second place man. And this is the interest and excitement of the Brazilian Grand Prix. The mice have got at the machinery, or the heat has got at the drivers, or both, of 14 out of the 26 cars that started the race. And what a trial Rosberg is. Just look at that.
I was just going to say, Mara, you see, I think they're both getting tired. Piquet looks a little bit ragged there, but I have to say, it's absolutely 10 out of 10 to both of them, because they're in that awkward situation where they've got a gap that's stuck. They're in a stalemate situation, and for sure, they're both giving it 100%. Piquet obviously to try and stretch his lead. Rosberg desperately trying to cling on, trying to close that gap. He's not doing it, and they're giving 110% of physical effort at a time when they're both exhausted. And I have to say, it's a most heartwarming sight, and I'm jolly glad I'm not out there doing battle with them. It's a lot comfier here.
Well, that doyen of Grand Prix racing, incidentally, Ken Tyrrell, who has had the most successful Grand Prix driver of all time under his management, Jackie Stewart, and a lot of others, must be very pleased at the moment, because up into 6th place on lap 48 has gone, and that's not me either, has gone Michele Alboreto, who's gone up into 6th place. Michele, who joined Ken Tyrrell last year and who also drove in Formula 2, has taken his place as the Tyrrell team leader this year, with various changes in the team. And now he's up into 6th place because he has got ahead of the German Manfred Winkelhock, who is therefore down to 7th place and remains the last man not to have been lapped by the flying Nelson Piquet that we are looking at now on lap 48. We're getting into the closing stages of the Brazilian Grand Prix, and there is Rosberg. As soon as I can get them both at a point where I can time them on the circuit, I'll give you the gap. It was 2.5 seconds. It looked visually less than that to me. Piquet leads Rosberg. Prost is still in 3rd position. There's only about 10 seconds between Piquet, the leader, and now this is where I can take the time. There goes Piquet, there goes Prost, and the time, the gap is 1.9 seconds. So it was 3.4 seconds when, as James predicted, Nelson Piquet started to try and break away as Alain Prost at the end of the straight appears in the Renault in 3rd position. I tell you that Rosberg has almost halved the gap which existed not so long ago between himself and Nelson Piquet. Now, is Piquet tiring? Remember what happened at Caesars Palace at the Las Vegas race?
Yes, it seems to be a real problem. Rosberg is certainly giving it a bit of a charge. I think I noticed, and I think I said about a lap ago, Piquet is getting a little bit ragged. But, of course, the sight of Rosberg getting closer to him will act as a great stimulus to him to pull his concentration together and buck himself up. It's not too far to go when you're sitting watching the race. It seems like a million miles when you're in it. You're getting your lap signals with 12 laps to go, and they come down so slowly. It really is. The latter stages of a race like this are really a little bit like marathon running. They're in the same sort of advanced stage of dehydration and exhaustion, the marathon runner, once he's passed 20 miles. And they have the disadvantage, of course, of really acute physical discomfort because they're in this terrible heat. They're being battered around. The hands are starting to get raw from sawing away on the wheel and the gear lever, and they've got bruises all over them from being thrown about in those hard cockpits. It's really much more now down to straight physical survival battle battle. I mean, even on a good day, and this is a bad day for it. Rosberg's dropped back a little bit, just visually, I just say, on this lap, but that, again, goes to show what a yo-yo it is physically. At the moment, Piquet looks to be in control. If he can just cling on physically, because Rosberg is, we've already established early in the race, definitely slightly slower on the straight, and he'll have a job. He'd have to get in perfect position to have a go at Piquet, and he's beginning to run out of laps to do that. First of all, he's got to get on terms, and of course, another problem with following another car on the physical side, it's much harder work driving the car when you're right behind somebody, because you're in their turbulence, and the car therefore doesn't handle so well. It buffets about a little bit, and it doesn't grip as well, so you've got to put more into it to keep close enough to get a passing maneuver. You see, Rosberg at the moment is just about far enough back to be in reasonably still air, so his car will be performing to about 100%. From that position onwards, the closer he gets, the worse the road holding performance of his car becomes as it gets more and more interfered with by the turbulence from Piquet's.
Well, the gap has increased to what it was. Nelson Piquet, that we look at, is now 3.3 seconds ahead of Rosberg, and this race matters enormously to Piquet, not just because he's world champion, not just because he's Brazilian in front of his home crowd, but because, funnily enough, he has never done well here at Brazil. He retired in 1979, he retired in 1980. Last year, he made the worst tactical mistake he's ever made in any race when he decided to start the wet Brazilian Grand Prix on slick tyres for dry conditions in the expectation that the course would dry out, and it didn't, as a result of which he finished in 12th place. Well, this is his chance, and he hasn't got many laps now to continue to hold his lead and come out as winner, because having just had a quick look at Alain Prost in 3rd place still in the Renault, and with the knowledge that Keke Rosberg is about 3.5 seconds now behind Piquet, there is the race leader on lap 51 out of 63. And where is Rosberg? There he is. Now, at this very point, on the last lap, it was 3.32 seconds, and the gap as Rosberg hits the dark patch there is 3.98 seconds. So Piquet has pulled out a half-second increase in his lead over the Finnish driver. Piquet, Brabham leads Rosberg, Williams. 3rd, Prost, Renault. 4th, Watson in the Marlboro. 5th, Mansell in the Lotus. 6th, Alboreto in the Tyrrell. 7th is Salazar, Winkelhock in the ATS. The last man unlapped, and it's getting very, very thin on the ground after them. Pironi is still about the place, and there, 3.3 seconds, my timing wasn't so far out, the gap between this man, race leader, on his way to his 7th Grand Prix win in his comparatively short career, Nelson Piquet. And Piquet was the man who first really made his name when he won the BP Formula 3 Championship here in Britain in 1978, during which time we found out that he's not only an extremely pleasant man and an extremely gifted driver, but also a very able engineer, very good at setting the car up, and he has endless consultations with Gordon Murray, the team designer. Now, I wonder if he's going to be held up here. He's got the ATS of Winkelhock in front of him, and Winkelhock is the last man so far not to have been lapped by Nelson Piquet, and this is where Rosberg could catch him.
Piquet's got past him on the straight. He had a good run at him there, and that's through. In fact, in a way, it might be a problem for Rosberg if he catches Winkelhock on a twisty section. But I must say, Piquet seems to have pulled himself together very well indeed. I think it's obviously difficult to tell, but I think it would be fair to say he's put on a spurt. I think the sight of Rosberg's car looming closer and closer must have given him that little jolt of adrenaline to get himself going again, and he's responded fantastically well. He now seems to be well in command.
Yes, and Rosberg, of course, is going to have to face the problem of Winkelhock. There's the difference, 3.5 seconds. So while it was 3.8, there's Rosberg, with a bit of luck, should be able to scramble past Winkelhock at the end of the straight. No, it's not quite long enough. And the gap is increasing all the time between Prost is dropping right back, and we're beginning to wonder whether John Watson, who we haven't seen for quite a while, who was about 4 seconds behind Alain Prost, will be able to recatch the Frenchman and get up into third position.
Well, there was a very good shot there, didn't you? You can see how tired Piquet was, because he rested his head on the outside of the car as he went round that corner. His head just gave way, and so he's certainly suffering in the neck department. That's always one of the first big problems to go, because you're wearing that heavy helmet. You get such huge G-forces from these cars. I mean, in the first 4 months of driving Grand Prix racing, my neck physically grew over an inch in circumference. What shirts? The 2 shirts that I owned had to be slung, and 2 more bought to get round my neck. Just that, and that was just in building it up. And of course, it got bigger later. It's bigger still.
Well, Rosberg has taken half a second out of the lead. It's down to 3.4 seconds. But Rosberg, incidentally, always looks to me physically to be a man out of his time, because he has this very distinctive handlebar moustache, and I always have a mental image of Keke Rosberg holding a bowler hat and standing beside a penny farthing bicycle. I don't suppose you'd be very pleased to hear me say that, but the moustache is very, very distinctive. It's not delaying in one iota, though. A tremendous battle between himself and Piquet, and there goes the head again as Piquet completes his 53rd, taking a tail ender. In fact, he's taking Borgood. That was Slim Borgood that he'd passed and lapped for the second time. And Rosberg has got ahead of the ATS of Winkelhock. So there you see the positions. Piquet leads, Rosberg second, Prost third. Watson is about, 7 seconds behind Prost. Then Mansell, who's about half a minute behind. So I don't think Nigel Mansell is going to move up very much further, but he's going to finish well up in the points if he keeps going. And the best that Nigel Mansell has done so far was a 3rd position in the Belgian Grand Prix in the Lotus 87 last year. And there are now, of course, 10 laps to go. They're on lap 54, 63 lap race, clear straight. Very few cars left in the race. Those that are left in the race, I think the cars are mechanically strong, but are the drivers physically capable is the big problem.
Yes, it used to be, of course, the cars that were always a problem when they were much lighter to drive. It's now, of course, both sides of the coin. But the cars have been surprisingly reliable on their mechanical thing here, because once the heat gets around 30 degrees and over, reliability of racing cars definitely drops off a bit. That little bit of extra heat running through every component seems to put quite a lot more strain on it. And there's been relatively few mechanical breakdowns today, or that we've seen.
The positions on lap 54 in this 63-lap, 197-mile searing heat Brazilian Grand Prix of 1982. Nelson Piquet leads from Keke Rosberg by now about 5 seconds. The gap is increasing. 3rd position, Alain Prost, some way behind. 4th position, John Watson. 5th position, a long way back, Nigel Mansell. 6th position, last man to be in the points, Michele Alboreto. Then Winkelhock is in 7th position, and up into 8th place by keeping going, Didier Pironi, who hasn't, of course, had to face the problem that his teammate Villeneuve had of having this man, Nelson Piquet, harrying him every inch of the way. Piquet leading them. There is Keke Rosberg, still a close thing. Take the time here again, start the stopwatch. Piquet on his way, and the gap as Rosberg hits the patch is 5.93 seconds. So it would seem as though if Nelson Piquet is tired, Keke Rosberg is also very, very tired indeed. Still, laps 55, 6, 7, 8, 9, 61, 2 and 3 to go. And Rosberg went off there. He rode right up out onto the curb, and I saw his wheels momentarily clip the grass. And that is an indication, surely, of the fact that the Finnish driver, who has regained the circuit very cleanly, and see the way his car is bouncing on the rigid suspension over the bumps, is indeed an extremely tired man. because he momentarily lost concentration there, drifted out just a few inches too wide, rode up the curb. Here is Piquet completing lap 55. There's Bernie Ecclestone, the head man not only of the Formula One Constructors Association, but the boss man of the Brabham team. And he bought the Brabham team from the very great 3 times world champion Australian Sir Jack Brabham, one of Australia's 2 world champions with Alan Jones. Ecclestone bought the Brabham team from Sir Jack, Black Jack Brabham, from the heavy beard growth that he had that always showed up through the shaving some years ago. And Bernie Ecclestone has made that team now just as successful as Jack Brabham did in his great days with Denny Hulme. Piquet 28 seconds ahead of Prost. Prost is in 3rd place, and there he is in the... No, that's the ATS, I'd forgotten. And there is Keke Rosberg, who is 2nd. That's Winkelhock in the background, and Alain Prost is out of the picture. But Alain Prost, if he keeps going, the man from Saint-Chamond will get 4 points to add to the 9 that he got for winning the World Championship. Piquet is pulling away all the time now. The gap is 8 seconds now. 8 seconds, the gap between number 1 here, and you look down the circuit, there is Rosberg, and the camera, of course, always makes the gap look much smaller than it really is. If you put a stopwatch on them, it's quite significantly different. Piquet has now completed lap 56. There is Rosberg, and I won't say it's gone quiet at the Jarepagua circuit here at Rio, but it's certainly gone comparatively quiet with so few cars left in the race. Although, of course, although it's gone quiet, the Brazilian crowd are still on tenterhooks, have bitten their fingernails down to their elbows, I should think, because they want their man to come home first again. It's a long time since a Brazilian, and it was Emerson Fittipaldi, has won the home Grand Prix. It could be the turn of a Brazilian again, Nelson Piquet. Back with the Ford Cosworth V8 engine. Now at the South African Grand Prix at Kyalami, the Brabham for the first time used the 4-cylinder BMW turbo engine, which produces about 550 horsepower and was doing some 200 miles an hour down the long straight down to Crowthorne Corner. But they've had a lot of engine problems getting the turbo right, and Brabham's decided that they were going to return to the tried and trusted Cosworth engine, Ford Cosworth engine. And I think, speaking from memory, if Piquet wins this race, it will be an incredible 146, either 145 or 146 Grand Prix wins for the marvellous Ford Cosworth engine, which was first taken to victory by the late and great Jim Clark in the Lotus 49 in the Dutch Grand Prix, and that was a long, long time ago. And that engine, updated year after year by Keith Duckworth and his men at Cosworth, has staved off the flat 12 Ferraris, the turbo Renaults, the turbo Ferraris, and now Nelson Piquet on lap 58 is leading Keke Rosberg by 7 to 8 seconds, depending whereabouts on the circuit you take it, and nearer 8 than 7 at that. And, well, I was going to say it looks as though it's all over bar the shouting, but having said it, I wish I hadn't, because many times I've said something like that in the past, only for something incredibly dramatic to happen in the closing stages of a Grand Prix, as when Sir Jack Brabham he was then, was leading at Monaco right down to what is now La Rascasse, the last corner on the last lap. He stuffed his car into the Armco, and Jochen Rindt went through to win the race at the very last corner. And there's a long way before the last corner yet, as Keke Rosberg is coming up to lap the tail ender. It'll be probably Alboreto that he's lapping, actually. Nelson Piquet on his way. Watch the way he lines the car up. He's keeping it away from the curbs because the suspensions are so stiff these days that if you ride up on the curb and the skirt comes off the ground, you get an instantaneous reduction of downforce and the car can immediately spin off the circuit. So Piquet is a wily enough and experienced enough campaigner now to know that with an 8-second gap that was at one time virtually nothing, with Rosberg right on his gearbox, if he just keeps going, plays his cards right, paces himself properly, lines the car up correctly on the corners, doesn't over-rev the engine, watches his pit signals, on lap 59 out of 63, he has got his 7th Grand Prix win of his career, and revenge for all the lack of success that he has had at Brazil over the years, with 2 retirements and that catastrophic 12th place last year. He's got a win virtually in the palm of his hand. In the background, not that the drivers will see it, of course, because we can, high up as we are, they can't see over the wall, even if they were prepared for a split second to take their eyes off the circuit, would be a very welcome sight. I know, James, that when you were racing, and perhaps when it wasn't even as hot as that, you lost a lot of weight. What sort of weight loss would you have had?
Well, my average weight loss for a Grand Prix was around about 9 pounds, and that's all straight liquid, just from the sheer physical output and the sweat. But in a race like this, on these hot climates, going the full distance, you can lose more than that. I mean, a big guy like me, or relatively large, could lose 13, 14 pounds maximum, and then you're really in quite serious dehydration states. You start to stop sweating. By this stage, these chaps probably won't be sweating anymore. They'll just be dry. And here you are with a temperature of over 40 degrees in the cockpit, shivering because the sweat's drying on you and your body's not producing anymore.
Well, I don't know whether Keke Rosberg has decided to give it best, that he's done the best he can and decided that there was no way he was going to catch, let alone get past Nelson Piquet. And it's very unlike Keke if that's what he has done, or whether Frank Williams has been giving him signals from the pit which in effect say steady as you go, because the gap has now increased and Nelson Piquet leads on lap 60, the Brazilian Grand Prix, from Keke Rosberg by over 10 seconds. So it's going to be a very, very clear victory. Piquet, Brabham, Ford Cosworth engine, leading on lap 60 from Keke Rosberg in the Saudi away Tag Williams car, which has also got a Ford Cosworth engine. The first turbo, unexpectedly, in many ways, although I don't think anybody actually expected a turbo to win here at Brazil, because they haven't got the enormous horsepower advantage that they had because of the altitude at Kyalami. And the first turbo is that of World Championship leader Alain Prost, 3 times a Grand Prix winner last year. In 4th position, it's another Ford Cosworth engined car, the Marlboro MP4 of the doughty and enormously experienced John Watson, who is actually driving today in his 124th Grand Prix. In 5th position, and the last man not to have been lapped by Nelson Piquet that we are looking at is Englishman Nigel Mansell, whose teammate Elio De Angelis went off the circuit in the Lotus 91, the new car, the new Weight Watchers Special, the John Player Special from the Lotus team. And in that John Player Special, Nigel Mansell is holding 5th position, and in 6th position behind, and he has been lapped, of course, is Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell. Then in 7th place behind Alboreto is Manfred Winkelhock in the ATS. 10th is Didier Pironi. In 11th position is Slim Borgood in the Tyrrell. In 12th position is Jochen Maas, who's come back into the running in the March car. And in 12th position sorry, in 11th position is Jean-Pierre Jarier, and then finally the last runner in 12th place is Mauro Baldi in the Arrows. Just let's check on the position of Jochen Mass. In 10th position, the German driver, 2 West Germans, then Manfred Winkelhock in the ATS, and in 10th position, Jochen Mass. And the leader, Nelson Piquet, is now on his penultimate lap, which is lap 62 out of 63. Let us then look at the gap. You can see the gaps on the right-hand side, and the gap between John Watson and Nigel Mansell is something like well over half a minute, and Mansell is something like, he's 14 seconds ahead of Michele Alboreto, and that was when we had 3 voltas por terminar, which I presume means 3 laps to the end. Well, we haven't got that now. We've only got this one and the next one, and we're watching Piquet, the man from Brazil, appropriately, and look at that. That's the victory for the Brazilians. They know that Nelson Piquet is on his winning way now. Nelson, funnily enough, after he had won the World Championship in the Caesars Palace Grand Prix at Las Vegas at the tail end of last year, did not, as many people expected him to do, go back to Brazil to receive the plaudits and the homage of his patriots. He stayed at Monaco, which is where he lives, because Nelson is in fact an extremely quiet and self-effacing man who doesn't seek, indeed doesn't welcome, publicity. He will talk willingly to people who he thinks know what they're talking about. He doesn't suffer fools at all, gladly. He's totally dedicated to his motor racing, and he is now on lap 63 out of 63. He's getting the big cheer every metre of the way around this course.
Yes, he's driven a really fine race. Very good. You see his head falling against the side of the cockpit again there. You see he's just resting his head on the side, and you've got to be in pretty major distress to do that, because the vibration you get through the bodywork is particularly unpleasant. It really shakes the old eyeballs about in their sockets. But he's driven a really worthy race as world champion, a real champion's effort. He fought hard in the early stages when he had to, aggressively, and then he hung on and drove very clean. He's just taking an easy line now. He's coasting up to the line almost, and but full marks. Look at the crowd, really loving it, celebrating like mad, throwing their bits of paper and stuff in the air. And of course, Keke Rosberg also drove a marvellous race. He was wonderfully aggressive in the early part of the race, but never silly with his aggression, always controlled in a car that I think probably wasn't quite as good as Nelson's on the day, and I think the result reflected that. But he certainly drove an outstanding race. He's driven many other races like that before, but never in such a good car, and that for the first time really showed his talent to the world at large.
And I can hear, believe it or not, the roar of the crowd above the engines of the cars, and that is absolutely amazing. When Piquet comes out of the left-hander into the finishing straight, and there he is, and the Brabham mechanics burst across the line, and the 1982 Brazilian Grand Prix has been won by Brazil's Nelson Piquet, a worthy world champion. There's his girlfriend in the background with the rest of the Brabham team, and Keke Rosberg crosses the line, the highest finish that he has ever had in Grand Prix racing. A very fine drive from both very, very tired men. So Piquet gets 9 points for that World Championship win. He didn't get any in South Africa. Alain Prost, well, there he is, crossing the line, gets 4 points for third position.